beat a woman who was bleeding and then blamed everybody else in the room. That's the kind of guy I'm supposed to give the benefit of the doubt to. This is just one more in a pile of steaming you know what that is being lumped onto that man every single day. And it doesn't matter how expensive and skilled his attorneys are. You get the case you're given, and they were given a real stinker. And all I can say to this is it is a really good thing that Sean Puffy Diddy Love Puff Daddy Combs loves applesauce, because they serve that regularly in prison.
How long does witness 2 have to present herself? And will legal action be taken against her? I think that this is in regards to Jane, who we've heard about, alleged victim number 2 in this case, came up in opening statements. Another person, a single mother who apparently had a relationship with Sean Combs, helped to further the narrative of sex trafficking. I guess the question is, what should we expect from her testimony? How does she have to present herself? How important she is? Let's just recharacterize the question that way, Ashley.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what she's going to say clearly, but I suspect that there'll be what I've seen already a lot of witnesses do, and that is corroborating the stories of the witnesses that came before them. It is remarkable how carbon copy many of their testimonies have been in describing down to the details in hotel rooms, how things are laid out. Unless all of these witnesses got together and had a coffee clatch and decided to get their stories straight, they sure do have similar accounts of life with Diddy. And perhaps Jane will have that, as well as, again, the piling on of what happened to her. Maybe there'll be another instance of Capricorn Clark said some things yesterday I didn't expect. 2 different kidnappings? Holy Dinah. Maybe she'll have an example of something like that. I don't know. But obviously the government has decided it's worthwhile to call her. But can I go back to that last question about the raids? I still
Sure.
don't understand why we haven't heard anything about what was seized in the LA raid, because all we kept hearing was 1,000 bottles of baby oil. And in Miami, it was only like a dozen. So is there something more to come? Because
Yeah.
I'm popping the popcorn.
You're not the only one who said that. They said, I don't understand. They only found out a limited number there. What happened to 1,000 bottles is the prosecution not being truthful. But maybe, look, they'll call maybe LA investigators to talk more about this Homeland Security that raided that property. Look, I think it's really interesting that you mentioned that, because going back to what I said with Gina, alleged victim number 3, again, 2019, I believe, as she sat down for an interview on YouTube where she said Combs stomped her, punched her. You want to talk consistency? Go to the 2016 tape of Cassie Ventura. Is it not the exact same thing? Now, again, is it domestic violence? Is it sex trafficking? Is it racketeering? Separate question. Okay. William, question from
Jesse.
Yes.
It's also pattern, right?
Pattern.
Because part of RICO requires a pattern of behavior. And so, man, oh man, have I seen a whole bunch of different kinds of patterns laid out so far. We're only into 2 weeks here. So I think that's all really important. It may be a pattern of domestic abuse, but it speaks to patterns of behavior that just keep repeating and just keep getting corroborated.
And with the intent that he forces them into sexual episodes. And these sexual episodes are commercial sex acts, and there's certain elements to follow there. But yeah, 100%. The pattern, so important for racketeering. I'm glad you mentioned that. William, we got a question from Camilla Chanko. Hi from the UK to Jesse and the panel. Thank you for your daily shows and updates. Thank you. Question, do you think Diddy's security team may have struck a deal with prosecutors and might testify later in the trial? William.
So, I would imagine when we talked about some of the other witnesses testifying, there were questions as to whether or not they had proffer agreements or if they had, received some sort of immunity in exchange for their testimony. I would imagine that Diddy's security team has some issues on their own regarding their own culpability here, especially if the testimony that we've heard so far is to be believed. So I'd be surprised if they didn't have some sort of immunity deal worked out. And I do think it would be important to hear from them. I think that they are crucial witnesses as far as the racketeering goes, as well as to corroborate some of these other statements that, for example, Vanessa made and that we heard about Kid Cudi and who was there and who was driving around with guns to confront people, who was driving around to confront Suge Knight with a gun, who was driving around to confront Kid Cudi with a gun. We know that Diddy wasn't doing these things by himself, and there was a team around him. And obviously that team includes the security personnel. So I would be surprised if we didn't hear from them. And if we do hear from them, I can almost guarantee that they've worked out a deal with the government. Otherwise, they have their own criminal exposure here.
of course, or at least they have to be asked, racketeering conspiracy? He can't agree with himself. There's got to be multiple players. And there's a whole idea in the indictment. Every superseding indictment has said the same thing, right? He's got his associates, the people around him who helped facilitate these crimes and cover them up. Actually, William, one more question I want to throw to you. It's an interesting legal question. This is from Nicole RZV. If Diddy knows deep down that he ordered the Molotov cocktail incident, again referring to the Kid Cudi bombing of his car, would he admit that to his lawyers? And if so, does the defense team still defend him knowing he committed the act? Good question.
That is a good question. So, I mean, I've been a criminal defense attorney for going on 30 years. And if I only represented people who were innocent, or if I only represented people who said they didn't do it, I'd be doing something else, because it just doesn't work that way. So if he admitted to certain facts to his lawyers, that's attorney-client privilege, and they can't reveal it, and chances are they would still continue to represent him. I assume that's the question. I mean, again, there aren't a lot of lawyers out there who will only represent individuals who didn't do it.
But you can't lie, right? You can't lie to the court.
But that's a different story entirely, and I don't think that's what the question was. If the question was...
It was my question. I threw it in.
Sure. If they know that Diddy was involved in it, if they know he was involved in the Molotov cocktail incident, they can't then put him on the stand knowing he's going to perjure himself. That's problematic for Diddy and the lawyers, certainly. So that's a slightly different question and changes the dynamic of it. So no, as a lawyer, I cannot put a client or even a witness on the stand knowing that they're going to give a falsehood or perjure themselves.
So we have an update from court. Again, officially back in session. The judge says, bring back in Mr. Nash, and then the jury all rise. Remember, Mr. Nash is the celebrity stylist who worked with Sean Combs and Cassie. Prosecutor asks, how many times in person have you witnessed Mr. Combs be violent? Nash replies, quite a few. Prosecutor says, this is a sealed exhibit. Without saying her name, do you recognize this person? We'll call Mia. Yes. Okay, so Tyler, this is confirmation, I think, that Mia is a pseudonym, right, from one of the alleged victims. We heard about her in opening statements. You can see the value of Mr. Nash's testimony, right? Not just testifying about observations regarding Cassie, but this other alleged victim who I believe might testify today, right, Tyler? I mean, this is important.
Yeah, we're seeing right now from Mr. Nash, who's been around not just Ms. Ventura, but Mr. Combs, that he has knowledge of, one, Mr. Combs being violent, and he also recognizes another individual under the pseudonym Mia, and who we believe may testify. So that shows that he's seen something that goes to the pattern, other evidence of other crimes. It furthers the racketeering and possibly sex trafficking. And what the prosecution is doing, they're not calling anybody to the stand who they did not know is going to further their case. And they're furthering their case by witnesses who are corroborating the evidence. They may get beat up from a little bit, sorry for the pun there, on cross-examination from Mr. Combs' lawyers, but overall, every witness has furthered the prosecution's case, and this is certainly doing the same here.
Ashley, we got an update from court. Prosecutor Maureen Comey asks, I lost it. There we go. What were you and Mia helping Cassie pack for? Responds, the OVO Fest in Canada. Who came to the door? Puff. He said, B, didn't I tell you to answer your phone? Then he dragged her by the hair and hit her. How hard was he hitting her? And we're waiting for the response there. Your reaction, Ashley.
You know, here we go again. I want to hear more context in what that was about. This is obviously on its own looks like an instance of domestic assault, which he's not charged with. But it speaks to the grand pattern of how Diddy controlled this woman. And you can say control might have been in the packing for some event in Canada, and it may have also extended, because you don't just control in one aspect of your life, right? If you're controlling someone all the time, you're controlling how you behave with them on a regular basis, including during the freak-offs, including during the performances. Cassie testified that she wanted to sing and she wanted to act and she wanted to model, but that Diddy wanted her to focus only on the music, right? Because that's what he could control. He could control the music. And what did he do? He controlled the music. He didn't release anything but one of her albums.
And we have a continuation of this testimony. So there was an objection. It was overruled. Again, how hard did he hit her? Well, Nash responds, very hard. We ran to the bedroom, but Puff pushed it open. He continued to attack Cassie with his fist. Prosecutor asks, what did you do to try to help Cassie? I jumped on Puff's back. He threw me off. Mia too. So if Mia testifies, it'll be very curious what she has to say about this incident. Okay, question for you, William. This is from Stephanie Faircloth. I love the show. Awesome information. Thank you for updating us so well. You're welcome. Thank you so much for saying that. Do you think those who testified will be offered witness protection after the trial is over? William, how does that work?
I don't think so. Witness protection, it's not quite like it is in the movies. Everyone knows who these folks are. I think the more likely deal is that some of these folks are going to seek out extra publicity, perhaps get movie deals, perhaps get book deals. I think that's much more likely than these folks being, squirreled away and hidden somewhere in Minnesota.
Well, William, I mean, let me couple that with a question that just came in. This is from AGGROCD. Why are we using aliases in court then?
So, I mean, obviously, for some of these folks, like Mia, for example, we are talking about individuals who are victims of sexual abuse. And until those people are willing to release their names on their own, if they even are, we're going to continue to use pseudonyms for them. That's common. It happens in many cases when we're dealing with sexual abuse. There's no need for them to be re-traumatized by having their names bandied about, unless, again, they're willing to volunteer on their own to admit who they are and go out in public that way.
Got to,
Jesse?
yes,
Jesse,
Ashley.
I just want to go back to something that I wish it had dawned on me 2 moments ago, but this Nash guy just testified that he jumped on Diddy's back to stop the beating. Has
Yeah.
anybody on this panel heard that happen yet? Has anybody else heard someone come to Cassie's defense? All I keep hearing is that she's being beaten up on a jet and nobody does anything about it. She's being beaten up in hotel rooms and nobody takes her to the police. She's being beaten up left, right, and center, and security are just staying back. This might be the first time I have heard someone in his inner circle, or at least who is around Diddy, come to the defense of Cassie or any other of the women that he just freely beats with his fists and his feet.
You know, that's a great point, Ashley. And I mentioned something earlier in the week about it, last week too, that I think one of the key takeaways from Dawn Richard's testimony is that when she said Cassie was beat up by Sean Combs in front of Usher, Jimmy Iovine, Neo, I said that goes to the power dynamic. If everybody's wondering why Cassie never left and why she didn't step forward and why she didn't report it, if these people are not going to step forward and he can do this in front of them and nobody steps in, what did you expect Cassie to do? And I think that's a key point. I'm glad you mentioned it, that you're right, this is the first time I've heard of anyone actually stepping in. And just to let you know, Nash just testified, Cassie's head hit the bed frame. She was bleeding, but Puff continued hitting her. The question is, where was Mia getting towels? What did Mr. Combs say to you, Mia and Cassie? He said, look what you all made me do. He said she'd go to a plastic surgeon. Okay, we're going to have to wrap things up. I want to get some final thoughts. Tyler, as we finish up today's lunch show and we think about the testimony we're hearing and the testimony to hear, final thoughts on the case.
I think this testimony coming out is absolutely terrible. It is showing the power dynamic. It's showing the sheer acts of violence that Mr. Combs would even do this to Ms. Ventura with others being present. I mean, that shows that others were also, they were scared possibly for their lives or what could happen if they went to the police, if they went to the aid of Ms. Ventura. These aren't just actors and singers. You got security people who see, real stuff, firearms, guns, violence all the time, but they're scared to step up when Mr. Combs is acting violent. So again, this paints him out as a monster. It furthers the prosecution's case. It's a long trial to go. We'll see what the defense has in their case in chief. And this is not looking good for Mr. Combs at all right now.
William, your turn. Final thoughts.
I agree. I think this has always been a very difficult case for Mr. Combs's lawyers to win. I think the government's doing a great job, and despite all the efforts being put forward by his defense attorneys, there's only so much you can do here. And I do think this evidence has just been piling on and piling on, and I think it's going to continue to get worse when we hear from these other witnesses as well who claim they were his victims.
Ashley, host of Drop Dead Serious, want everybody to check it out, and also host of Banfield on News Nation. Final thoughts as we wrap it up.
That final thing you just said, look what you all made me do. There is the ultimate dirtbag, right? The guy who commits all the crimes and then blames everybody else for it. I think that's the kind of thing that sticks with jurors. You beat a woman who was bleeding and then blamed everybody else in the room. That's the kind of guy I'm supposed to give the benefit of the doubt to. This is just one more in a pile of steaming you know what that is being lumped onto that man every single day. And it doesn't matter how expensive and skilled his attorneys are. You get the case you're given, and they were given a real stinker. And all I can say to this is it is a really good thing that Sean Puffy Diddy Love Puff Daddy Combs loves applesauce, because they serve that regularly in prison.
Ashley, William, Tyler, thank you all so much for coming on. Really appreciate all three of you. Really, really appreciate you making the time.